So we're on to the second part of the chapter, and we're going to look at persuasion by communication. And this is kind of the heart of advertising. It's really good stuff. I was talking to my daughter today. She had her first online class. She's home now, like everyone else, being quarantined, and she's probably about as happy as you are. Mm-hmm. Terrible thought. Anyway, I was talking about what I was doing, and she's like, "Wow, that sounds awful." She's like, "Dad, the least you could do is use sock puppets or something." And I thought, wow, now there's an idea. If we're going to talk about persuasion, let's use sock puppets. Hi, everybody, it's me, and we're here to talk about social psychology. Okay. Yeah, you can tell it's late, can't you? All right, we're going to move on and get to the PowerPoint. Okay, persuasion by communication. Persuasive communication is the result of three interacting factors: the source, or who, the message, or what, and the audience factor, to whom. So you start with your source, who has a message. We'll take the ShamWow guy as an example. You know him, right? Okay, so he's the source. The audience includes everyone who's watching on cable TV. So now we get to the good part. How do we process the message? If we're pretty smart and pretty motivated, we're going to take the central route of persuasion and look at the ShamWow ad and carefully evaluate the merits of the product. However, if we're either not terribly bright or not motivated, we're going to take the peripheral route. We won't pay very close attention, and whether we're persuaded will hinge on whether the ShamWow guy catches our attention and seems cool. Okay, so some of you are just tootling along right now, half paying attention to this presentation. In other words, you're taking the peripheral route. But wake up for a second, because this little model is the basis for basically all of advertising. In other words, understand this and you got a pretty good grip on how all advertising works. So the basic assumption behind the central route of persuasion is that what counts is the quality of your argument. So think about advertising. If you believe that the central route to persuasion is what sells your product, then you will make your advertisement with lots of facts and figures. You want to prove that your product is the best. And all of this is based on the assumption that your audience, the people who read or watch your advertisement, are people that are active, attentive, and that they critically think about what you're saying. The assumption is that people actually pay attention. That sounds great, but the reality is, not necessarily the case. For example, what about intelligence and self-esteem? Do they matter in terms of persuadability? Well, smart people with a high self-esteem are more likely to understand and retain a message, but they're less likely to believe it. People that are, shall we say, slower and have a lower self-esteem are more willing to accept the content, but less able to understand it. So these things kind of cancel each other out. Neither group is generally more vulnerable to persuasion than the other. Now, let's look briefly at the peripheral route. The peripheral route is basically the opposite of the central route of persuasion. Instead of assuming that people are rational, logical, and critical thinkers, it assumes that people are shallow, superficial, and that they respond to peripheral cues. Hello, I think that's me sometimes. Anyway, people are likely to be influenced by interesting but irrelevant factors. You can always tell an advertisement that's done on the peripheral route. It's all about looks and vanity. When is the last time you saw an advertisement for women's shampoo that featured an unattractive, frumpy, middle-aged woman? When is the last time you saw a light beer commercial that featured a bunch of middle-aged, pot-bellied guys in need of a shave? People may want to hear a little about the content of that shampoo or that light beer, but they don't want to know much. So the ads that focus on the peripheral route tend to focus on irrelevant factors. Oh, look, shiny. That's the peripheral route. There's quite a bit of research on the peripheral route, and some of it's pretty fun stuff. For example, in one study, they told participants to nod their heads up and down as if they were saying yes while they were watching an advertisement, or to move their heads back and forth as if they were saying no as they were, listening to an advertisement. And then later they said, evaluate the product. If you'd been nodding your head up and down, you liked the product. You've been shaking your head back and forth like you're saying no, you didn't like the product. I mean, it's interesting that something that superficial would work, but yeah, sadly, we're that superficial. Yes, next. So what makes an effective source? Now remember, there's three elements involved in persuasion: the source, the message, the audience. Let's look briefly at what makes an effective source. An effective source is someone who's credible and trustworthy. By credible, I mean someone who has intelligence and credentials. Think about the commercials that you see. If it's medicine, they interview a doctor. If it's tires, they'll have a race car driver. If it's a weight loss product, they're going to have some celebrity that has lost weight. These are people with credibility. Trustworthiness is also a factor. Trustworthiness is about about people who appear to be willing to talk straight, right? Think about it. You seldom have a comedian as a spokesman for a serious product. Imagine having Will Ferrell as your spokesman for life insurance. Now, Will Ferrell's a funny guy, but he's not the kind of guy that would seem to have any kind of competence, expertise, and it's hard to imagine him being serious enough to take something like to make him sound trustworthy. I mean, could you hear him saying, "Are you in good hands?" He just couldn't pull it off, right? Or take Tiger Woods. Not too long ago, he appeared in a lot of commercials. Then he had his little marital meltdown, so you don't see him in too many commercials anymore. There probably aren't too many serious products that he could be an effective spokesman for, unless it's something like, say, condoms or certain medications, which I won't mention. But you get the idea. So the issues of credibility and trustworthiness are an interesting paradox. Let's say that you have a really, really good celebrity endorser. What you find is the more products they endorse, the less trustworthy they appear to consumers. It's called the self-interest rule. Basically, beware of people who have something to gain from successful persuasion. Okay, now, who do you trust? This is an interesting slide. Look this over. And well, maybe this may be one of the things we talk about in class. It's an interesting deal. How would you raise, say, look at the bottom there, you got car salesman, insurance salesman. What would you do to increase the credibility and trustworthiness of somebody like a car salesman? So it could be kind of a challenge, right? Okay, so more about what makes an effective source. Another factor is likability. Okay, two factors actually. Just gonna get my stuff here together. Likability and similarity. Okay, first let's look at similarity. Diane Mackey and her colleagues at the University of California, Santa Barbara had students read speeches debating whether they should continue to use the SAT test in college admissions. Some of the arguments were strong, some of the arguments were weak. Half of the students were told that the author was one of their classmates at UCSB. The other half was told that the author was a student at University of New Hampshire. Now, very few students believed the weak argument, regardless of who they thought made it. That is, they were more likely to change their attitudes if they felt this. Let me get this back again. Okay, very few students believed the weak argument, regardless of who made the argument. But they were more likely to change their attitudes if they felt the strong argument was made by one of their fellow students at UCSB. In other words, people still evaluated the argument, but similarity, or being perceived as one of us, that's the similarity, also helped. So in the last couple slides back, I mentioned the self-interest rule. There are a few exceptions to this, and about celebrities who can endorse lots of products. And it's primarily related to this concept of likability. For example, take guys like Peyton Manning and Shaquille O'Neal. They endorse a lot of products and they can pull it off, but it's mostly because they have a lot of likability and they have just a kind of very natural sense of humor about them. Now let's talk about physical attractiveness, okay? Lots of research on that, of course. And, it's one of those deals which you kind of already know. You can pick up any magazine and you'll find lots of pictures of supermodels, but it's not just supermodels. As you see in this slide, Shelley Chaikin and her colleagues had male and female college students approach other college students on campus and ask them to sign a petition for the university cafeteria to stop serving meat at breakfast and lunch. Not exactly a popular position. Can you imagine that at McMurray? Actually, can you imagine being back at McMurray and having normal meals? I miss the mystery meals. Anyway, so you ask them to sign that kind of petition. Not exactly a popular position. The result is that people who are attractive had a higher response rate on their surveys than other people who are less attractive. So like 41% to 32%. Can you just picture this? A bunch of college guys going, "Oh, yeah, baby, I'll sign your survey. Here's my number. Call me. Well, you get the idea. But that is what happens, right? Attractiveness does work to a certain degree. All right, so we're going to stop at this point, and this is kind of the first half of the chapter, or the whole chapter. So have a good day or night, depending on where you're at, and we'll be back later.